Hello everyone, have a nice day. Today, we will explore Jack and Tutien's journey as they prepare heartfelt gifts, hand-wrap sticky rice cakes by the fire, and travel through cold mountain fog to visit the woman who once saved Tutien's life. What begins as a quiet act of gratitude turns tense when the house is locked, the yard is empty, and the silence feels wrong. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. The lock was cold against Jack's knuckles. He leaned closer to the wooden door and tried again, one firm knock, then another, listening as if the house might answer with a breath. Behind him, Tutien stood in the fog with a cardboard box of supplies pressed to her chest like it was a fragile apology. Her lashes shimmered with mist, and when she whispered, "Grandma," the word sounded smaller than the mountain. No footsteps came, no voice, only the soft hiss of fog sliding through bamboo and the quiet crackle of the little fire Jack had started beside the stove to keep her warm. Tutien's fingers trembled around the strap of her bag, the one holding the sticky rice cakes she wrapped by hand all night. She had imagined this moment so many times, handing the cakes over, bowing her head, saying thank you, without choking on the memory of being alone in the woods. But the door stayed shut, and gratitude had nowhere to land. Jack turned back to her, his eyes steady, even when the world wasn't. "We'll wait," he said softly. "Just a little." Tutien nodded, but her throat tightened. Waiting was a dangerous word in her life. Waiting meant you could lose someone without warning, and she couldn't bear the thought of losing Grandma the way she almost lost herself. The afternoon before had felt almost ordinary, warm enough to pretend the past didn't still live under Tutien's skin. Jack stood at the doorway of the farmhouse, one hand on his keys, the other adjusting his sleeve like he was about to walk into a meeting instead of a life he was trying to protect. Outside, the land showed fresh lines where the excavator had leveled the soil that morning, turning rough ground into something ready for planting. "I'm going to the company for a bit," Jack told her. "Just finishing a few things. You stay home and rest." Tutien followed him to the door. Her eyes moved from the tire tracks outside to Jack's face, searching for reassurance she didn't want to ask for. "Jack," she said, voice careful, "should we go to see Grandma today?" Jack checked the time. The sun was already leaning toward late afternoon. "Not today. It's too late now. You said it's far up the forest road. We will go early tomorrow." Tutien let out a breath. She didn't realize she'd been holding. "Okay, tomorrow." Then, like she couldn't stop herself, she added, "I want to bring her something, not just store-bought." Jack's brows lifted gently. "What do you mean?" Tutien glanced toward the bag of sticky rice sitting in the corner of the kitchen. "I want to wrap sticky rice cakes with my own hands. I know we can buy them, but I want Grandma to feel that I came back as a person who can give, not only receive." Jack's expression softened. He stepped closer and brushed his thumb along her cheek, as if checking she was here, truly here. "Okay," he said, "but don't push your body. Promise me." "I promise," Tutien whispered. Jack nodded once. "I'll pick you up at the end of the alley around 3. We'll go to the market and buy essentials. Rice, fish sauce, salt, anything she might need." When he left, Tutien stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his car disappear down the road. The air felt lighter and then heavier, because hope always did that. She turned back inside and went straight to the kitchen. She soaked the sticky rice until the water ran clear. She peeled green beans and set them aside. She smoothed banana leaves on the table, choosing the widest, prettiest ones like she was preparing a gift for someone she respected deeply. The dog sat nearby, ears perked, watching her as if her quiet focus was a show. "Watch the house," she told him with a small smile. "I'll be back." She walked to the stream to collect more leaves. The air there was colder, the ground damp under her shoes. She stayed close, because Jack's worry had become part of her own caution. Back home, she checked her medicine and took it on time. She studied her arms, her face looking for the signs she feared. Redness, swelling, blood, nothing. "No rash," she murmured. "Thank you." It wasn't a prayer to the sky. It was a prayer to any part of life that still listened. By the time the clock edged toward 3, Tu Tien was already waiting at the end of the alley too early. But she didn't want Jack to see her anxious. When his car arrived, he stepped out quickly, eyes sweeping the road. "Have you been waiting long?" he asked. Tu Tien shook her head. "I just came out." Jack didn't argue. He never did when she lied to protect his feelings. He only opened the door for her and said, "Let's go." The market was crowded, noisy, and lively. Jack stood at the meat stall, choosing pork belly with the seriousness of a man selecting building materials. Tu Tien moved through the vegetable section, buying potatoes and onions, then bean sprouts, then eggs when she found them. When their bags grew heavy, Jack silently took the heaviest ones from her hands. Tu Tien looked up at him, and her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something softer, the kind of warmth she had once believed she didn't deserve. At the grocery shop, Tu Tien's list became more personal. "The road up there is difficult," she said. "Grandma lives alone. If she can't come down often, at least she won't go hungry." Jack nodded without hesitation. "We buy it." They bought rice, fish sauce, salt, and instant noodles. Jack paid, then asked for a cardboard box to pack everything so they could carry it more easily through the forest path. On the way home, the sky deepened into the evening. Tu Tien glanced at the box of supplies between them, then at Jack's hands on the steering wheel. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly it almost blended into the road noise. Jack glanced at her, and his voice softened. "You don't have to thank me." But Tu Tien did, because gratitude was the only thing that made her feel like she was still human. Back at the farmhouse, the kitchen filled with the smell of braised pork and warm rice. Tu Tien cooked with careful energy, and Jack hovered nearby, offering help without crowding her. "Are you tired?" he asked. "A little," she admitted, "but it's kind of tiring." Jack watched her for a second, then stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her from behind, just long enough to steady her heart. "Tomorrow," he murmured near her ear, "we'll bring the cakes. We'll see Grandma." Tu Tien closed her eyes, letting herself believe him. Because tonight, she would wrap her thank you by hand. And tomorrow, she would find out if the mountain would let her deliver it. Night came in quietly, as if it didn't want to disturb what they were building. After dinner, Jack pulled a small table closer to the stove, so Tu Tien wouldn't have to bend too much. The firelight painted gold across her cheeks while she laid banana leaves flat, smoothing every fold with patient fingers. Her hands moved the way her heart wanted to move, careful, steady, determined not to waste what mattered. "You're doing great," Jack said, tying bamboo strings into neat loops. His voice was warm, but his eyes kept drifting to her face, checking for strain. Tu Tien smiled without looking up. "I'm wrapping them for Grandma. I want them to look respectful." Jack's mouth curved. "Then I'll tie them tight, so they arrive safe." They worked late. The cake stacked up square, imperfect, real. When the pot finally began to boil, the sound was soothing, like the house itself was breathing. Tu Tien slipped on thick socks and sat closer to the fire. Jack draped a jacket over her shoulders anyway, as if his love was always one layer warmer than necessary. "Did you take your medicine?" he asked. She nodded. "I did. I'm okay." Jack leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Good. Tomorrow is a long walk." At dawn, the world turned gray and quiet. Fog clung to the road like wet cotton. Jack drove as far as the narrow forest path allowed, then parked where the ground tightened into a dead end. "We'll carry the box together," he said, lifting it first, but still letting Tu Tien keep one hand on it, as if he understood she needed to feel useful. The trail was slippery. The higher they climbed, the colder the air became. Tu Tien's breath puffed white, and her fingers tingled even inside her sleeves. "This is the turn," she whispered, recognizing the fork where she had once chosen the wrong road in panic. It was foggy like this that day too. Jack stepped closer. "Stay next to me. Don't rush." When the mountain house finally appeared, it looked smaller than Tu Tien, remembered wooden walls darkened by moisture, a porch empty except for fallen leaves. The yard was too still. Tu Tien hurried forward and stopped at the door. "Grandma," her voice cracked at the end. "It's me, Tu Tien," silence answered. Jack set the box down carefully. He tried the door. Locked. Tu Tien's eyes shimmered. Maybe she went to gather herbs. Jack didn't correct her. He only scanned the trees, the roofline, and the ground near the steps. Then he pulled out his lighter. "Let's make a fire," he said. "You're freezing." They fed dry twigs into the stove until orange light flickered alive. Tu Tien warmed her hands, but her chest stayed cold. Minutes passed. No one came. Jack checked his phone. No signal. Tu Tien pressed her lips together, fighting the sting behind her eyes. "I just wanted to thank her properly." "You are," Jack said, voice low, "even if she isn't here to hear it." He took one of the hand-wrapped cakes and placed it near the door like an offering. Then he tucked a small envelope of money beneath it. Shielding it from the damp, Tu Tien watched, tears slipping free anyway. Gratitude hurts when you can't deliver it into someone's hands. Jack knocked again, louder. "Grandma, we came to visit." Nothing. Jack turned back to Tu Tien, his body angling in front of her. "We'll wait a little longer," he said. "Then we go down before the fog gets worse." A rustle cut through the mist. Tu Tien flinched. Jack moved instantly, one step forward. Arm out, palm open. "Stay back." Footsteps followed. Slow. Careful. Too close to the wind. Tu Tien clutched Jack's sleeve, pressing behind him. The fog shifted and a shadow formed between the trees. Jack's voice stayed steady, but it hardened like steel. "Who's there?" The figure stopped, and the mountain held its breath.
Safe Tu Tien. While Jack finishes work, Tu Tien carefully sows sticky rice, prepares beans and banana leaf, takes her medicine and shop with Jack for essential white rice, fish sauces, salt and instant noodles. That night, they share a warm dinner and stay at hand-wrapping sticky rice cakes beside the stove, turning gratitude into something tangible. At dawn, they hike through thick fog along a narrow forest trail, carrying the heavy box together. When they arrive, the house is locked, and Grandma is nowhere to be seen. Jack lights a fire to warm Tu Tien, checks his phone, but finds no signal, and decides to leave the hand-wrapped case and an envelope of money at the doorstep. Then rustling and slow footsteps approach the stairs. Thank you for watching.